Mark chapter 5. And they came over unto the other side of the sea into the country of the Gadarenes. Now Jesus had just calmed the storm out there in the sea and made it quiet. Now they've moved into the land of the Gadarenes. And when he was come out of the ship, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit. That word simply means demonic. He had a demonic spirit, who had his dwelling among the tombs, and no man could bind him, no, not with chains, because that he had been often bound with fetters and chains, and the chains had been plucked asunder by him, and the fetters broken in pieces, neither could any man tame him. He was demonic. He was just wild. And folks, see, we have got away from that, and we don't even teach demonic spirits in most places anymore. It scares people. But I'll assure you, the devil hadn't quit possessing those that allow him to possess. You know, the other day when the guy at the Navy Yard went through there shooting, did y'all see what he said? He'd been, what was it, under short waves or something, was voices telling him through short waves. Yeah, this voice is telling him there is demonic spirits still operating. The devil is not on vacation. And until we recognize that, folks, we won't recognize what to do about it. And always, night and day, he was in the mountains and in the tombs, crying and cutting himself with stones. And when he saw Jesus afar off, he ran and worshipped him. Now, he's possessed, but he understood, and he immediately saw who Jesus was. And again, every time I see something like this, it makes me astonished, I guess, that people possessed with demonic spirits recognize Jesus, and people who are supposed to be educated, in their right mind, doesn't. And it's don't recognize him. Don't recognize him. And cried with a loud voice and said, What have I to do with thee, Jesus, thy Son of the Most High God? Note exactly who he was. I adjure thee by God that thou tormentest me not. Now, you see, this man has got two things working here. He's enough that he knows that he needs something, but he cannot free himself from the spirit that has possessed him. And I'm going to tell you something, folks. Once you are under that demonic spirit, you can't free yourself. You can't. It takes the power of God to get free of these things. And he said unto him, Come out of the man, thou unclean spirit. And he answered him, What is thy name? And he asked him, What is thy name? And he answered, saying, My name is Legion, for we are many. In other words, he was pretty well controlled. Legion or legend, that's in the Roman army, that would be between 3,000 and 6,000 people. So this guy was pretty well under control. And he besought him much that he would send them away, he besought him much that he would not send them away out of the country. Now there was nigh unto the mountains a great herd of swine feeding, and all the devils besought him, saying, Send us into the swine, that we may enter unto them. Now, you see, the demonic spirit has no power unless it can possess a body. It has to possess something before it can have any power.
Where does it go?
It does if it's going to have any kind of power or influence. And you remember, and like I said, this unclean spirit is a demonic spirit. You remember when Jesus, he said, when the unclean spirit goeth out of a man, he seeketh through dry places, seeking rest. In other words, he's got to find some place. If they open that door a crack, yes. Because Christ said he seeks some place to find rest, or in other words, find a place where he can operate. It's not different. Not in the way we think about difference. It's all demonic spirits. You know, there's people who are chained with pornography, which is a demonic spirit, chained with drug addiction, which is a demonic spirit, chained with all of it. See, when he said my name is Legion, it doesn't mean that there was 6,000. It just means there's many. As he said, because we're many. Many. In other words, the man was totally and completely under the influence of a demonic spirit. And he knew it. But he's out there all this time in the tombs cutting himself with stones, and they can't control him. And forthwith Jesus gave them leave, and the unclean spirits went out and entered into the swine, and the herd ran violently down a steep place into the sea, and they was about 2,000, and were choked in the sea. And they that fed the swine fled and told it to the city and the country, and they went out to see what it was that was done, and they came to Jesus and see him that was possessed with the devil and had the legion, sitting and clothed in his right mind, and they were afraid. Now, isn't it something? Now, here's the dude that's been out there just crazy man in the tombs, cutting himself and crying and breaking the chains and busting loose when they try to get him to help him, and they see him all right. And then they're afraid. And then they're afraid. Well, something's going on here. But so I wonder how many of them didn't have a few themselves. But they were afraid. And they that saw it told them how it had befallen him that was possessed with the devil, and also concerning the swine. And they began to pray him to depart out of their coast. Don't do no more stuff like this. Don't be casting out no devils. And I guarantee you, you'd have folks running out of the churches now if somebody cast out one. If you never saw anybody that was really possessed, it's something. It's something. Lot of that, though, was religious stories. But you notice, though, we're talking about the man that was sitting there clothed. Now, they're out there in a desert place in the tombs. Who clothed him? Jesus didn't just set him free. Jesus didn't give him back his right mind. Jesus clothed him. And when he was coming to the ship, he that had been possessed with the devils prayed him that he might be with him. Howbeit Jesus suffered him not, but said unto him, Go home to thy friends, and tell them how great things the Lord has done for thee, and hath had compassion on thee. And he departed and began to publish in Decapolis and how great things Jesus had done for him, and all men did marvel. And when Jesus was passed over again by ship to the other side, much people gathered unto him, and he was nigh unto the sea. And behold, there cometh one of the rulers of the synagogue, Jairus by name, and he saw him, and he fell at his feet. Now, I want you to notice, this is the leader of the synagogue. And every time Jesus showed up in the temple and the synagogue, the Jews had a fit over it. They didn't want nothing to do with him. But here's a man with a need, and you know where he went? Not to the synagogue, but to Jesus. Because they had saw what he did. They had heard what he said. They didn't really want that till the need arose. But when the need arose, the leader of the synagogue went to where he knew he could get some help. And besought him greatly, saying, My little daughter lieth at the point of death. I pray thee, come and lay thy hands on her, that she may be healed, and she shall live. Do you see that? They understood that Jesus was doing some stuff. They understood that. And Jesus went with him, and much people followed him and thronged him. And a certain woman, which had an issue of blood 12 years, and had suffered many things of many physicians. Now, I like that. Suffered many things of many physicians. In the name of healing. And if you look back at some of those, and I'm sure that the physicians that she's going to, they're under the Roman rule. A lot of the physicians had probably, had learned some of these things had been passed down. It was passed down, and a lot of it was superstitious. But if you look back, and see some of the things, especially back in the Egyptians, some of the things that they did for healing, you wonder how anybody ever survived it. And undoubtedly this woman she had gotten worse. Had spent all that she had and was nothing better but rather worse. And when she had heard of Jesus, came in the press behind him and touched his garments. Now, when Luke is telling this story, in Luke the 8th chapter, it said that she touched the border, it's the hem, the border of his garment. Now, or the fringe. Now, the Lord had told them over in Leviticus to on the fringes of their robe to put this blue ribbon, and it was to remind them of all his commandments that he'd given them. So what she's doing, she's reaching out to the Word of God. She's touching the hem of his garment, that where the truth of God is represented. She knows who he is. She knows what he's been doing, and she sees that, and she said, if I could just touch that, all the promises, all the power of God is in the Word of God, I'll be fine. For she said, if I may but touch his clothes, I shall be whole. Not maybe, but I shall be whole. If I can touch him, I shall be whole. And straightway the fountain of the blood was dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of that plague. Now let me tell you something, folks. In those days, any kind of impurity like that, you were not supposed to be out among the people. I mean, they could have stoned her for being out. But hey, she done spent all her money. She's getting worse. You get pretty desperate when you've done all you know to do. And she heard Jesus is coming by. So, I mean, I guess she probably thought like the lepers we see in the Old Testament, that was outside the gate, and they said, hey, we're sitting out here dying anyway, so we might as well just go in and see what we can get. But she'd probably come to that place where she said, hey, I'm dying anyway. So if they stone me, they stone me. But if I can touch him, I'll be made whole. And Jesus, immediately knowing in himself that virtue had gone out of him, turned him about in the press and said, who touched my clothes? And the disciples said unto him, seest thou the multitude thronging thee, and sayest thou, who touched me? In other words, the disciples said, what are you talking about, Jesus? Everybody touching you. I mean, that's what they're saying. What are you talking about? Don't you see all this crowd? All of them's touching you. But all of them wasn't touching him in faith. Just one touched him in faith. And when that one touched him in faith, he knew it. He knew it. And he looked around about to see her that had done this thing, and the woman, fearing and trembling, see, she was afraid. She didn't know what he's fixing to do now, but she knew she was healed. Knowing what was done in her, it came and fell down before him and told him all the truth. And he said unto her, daughter, thy faith hath made thee whole. Go in peace and be whole of thy plague. She laid her life on the line. Yeah, she said, if I can't touch him, I shall. But she laid her life on the line because she understood. I mean, she had that down. If I can touch him, I'll be healed. See, the same way with salvation. I can say I believe in Jesus. But if in my spirit I don't believe in Jesus, I'm not saved. It's through faith. Drawn by his Spirit, saved by his grace through faith in that. Because the devils know that there's a Jesus. And you see in the book where they call him Jesus, thy Son of God. But it's through faith, believing, knowing that he is who he said he is, and that he will do what he said he'd do. And then it becomes ours because he does not override the dominion you have or the dominion I have. He doesn't override it. He didn't say, like I heard a preacher say one time that Jesus was going to save some folks. It don't matter how they's living. If they hadn't wanted to go to heaven, they ought not have got saved. Well, no. When he saved them, folks, he made them eligible for heaven. But there's nobody going to heaven kicking and screaming saying, I don't want to go, folks. When you're saved, your dominion was not taken away. It just wasn't. You just put your trust in him. You said, I believe that he will do. He will give me the salvation. I believe he's able to keep it. That which I have committed unto him. See? And he is. He is. There's nobody that has ever backslid that accidentally did so. And while he yet spake, there came from the ruler of the synagogue's house certain which said, Thy daughter is dead. Why troublest thou the master any further? In other words, he could heal her. If you'd have got there in time, he could have healed her. But now she's dead. And as soon as Jesus heard the word that was spoken, he said unto the ruler of the synagogue, Be not afraid, only believe. Now see, he understood when he got this news. It was to rob him of the faith he had in Jesus. Hey, they might have been a cure when she's alive, but it's gone too far. There's no such thing as going too far for Jesus. First thing you said, don't be afraid. Don't let this rob you. You've came out here seeking a healing for your daughter, and he's already said if you touch her, she'll live. Don't let this make you afraid. Nothing's changed concerning Jesus. Nothing. And he suffered no man to follow him save Peter and James and John, the brother of James. And he cometh to the house of the ruler of the synagogue and seeth the tumult and them that wept and wailed greatly. And when he was come in, he said unto them, Why make ye this ado and weep? The damsel is not dead, but sleeping. And they laughed him to scorn. Hey, they're pretty sure she's dead. I mean, they done checked her. They're all crying and weeping. They're pretty sure she's dead. And Jesus said, No, she's just asleep. You know, he made a lot of folks think he's crazy a bunch of times. He did. Because he didn't play by their rules. He's not weeping and having a fit. He said, Don't sweat it. She's just asleep. And when he had put them all out, he taketh the father and the mother of the damsel and them that were with him and entered in where the damsel was lying. Throwed out all the naysayers. Get out of the room. And he took the damsel by the hand and said unto her, Talitha cuma, which is being interpreted, Damsel, I say unto thee, arise. And straightway the damsel arose and walked, for she was the age of 12, and they were astonished with great astonishment. And he charged them straitly that no man should know it, and commanded that something should be given her to eat. And that word, astonished, that first word that's translated astonished here is the same word, we talked about last week where they talked about Jesus was beside himself. In other words, they said he's totally out of his mind. This word is the same word. When they saw her walking, they went totally out of their mind. Hey, you thought them out there that was weeping and crying was making a noise. Don't you know her mom and daddy was making some noise? They were making some noise because the daughter that was dead is up walking, and she's absolutely fine. And he went out from thence and came into his own country, and his disciples followed him. And when the Sabbath day was come, he began to teach them in the synagogues, and many hearing him were astonished. There's that word astonished again. He kept making folks astonished, saying, From whence hath this man these things? What wisdom is this which is given unto him, that even such mighty works are wrought by his hands? Is not this the carpenter, the son of Mary, the brother of James and Jose, and of Joseph, and Judah and Simon? And are not his sisters here with us? And they were offended at him. Did you see that? They said he's pulling something because we knew him since he's a kid. I mean, that's what it boils down to. Hey, this is Jesus, Mary's son. We know his whole family. Who does he think he is? And that's the spirit of man, folks. That is the spirit of man. Somebody can come from the outside with the same word, and folks don't know him will flock to hear him. But if it's somebody you're not expecting something from somebody you've known all your life. And they weren't either. They said something ain't right here because we've known him. Some of these people probably saw Jesus grow up because they knew all his brothers and sisters' names. They probably saw him playing out in the yard when he was a kid. They said, What's he doing? This is Jesus. He can't be who he says he is. And it made them mad because he was doing these great things. They were offended. But Jesus said unto them, a prophet is not without honor, but in his own country and among his own kin and in his own house. He said just what we talked about. Familiarity. If I'm familiar with him, if I've seen him around all this time and all of a sudden he's doing something, you wonder, well, what's he up to? He never did that before. See, Jesus didn't pull any miracles. He didn't do any miracles till his ministry started, until he was baptized by John. Now, there's some of the Gnostic. Thank you. Easy for you to say. The Gnostic writers. I'm trying to pronounce the G. The Gnostic writers, that went back and they wrote fiction, and they would add somebody's name to it to make it sound like it was good. But some of their writers had Jesus doing miracles from the time he was born. Some of them even had him talking in the womb and had him making clay pigeons and making them fly and all of this. But no, Jesus was subject to Mary and Joseph until he was grown, and Jesus did no miracles until he was baptized with the Spirit of God in the river of Jordan. He was baptized by John and the Spirit ascended, then his ministry started. And John even says the first miracle was the water turned into wine in a place called Canaan. And he could there do no mighty works, save he laid his hands upon a few sick folks and healed them. Do you see that? That's what you was talking about a while ago, Brenda, about faith. In his own hometown, people that knew him didn't believe it. And so there weren't many healed there at all. Same Jesus, same word, same power. And they marvel he marveled because of their unbelief. And he went about the villages teaching. And he called unto him the 12 and began to send them forth by 2 and 2 and gave them power over unclean spirits. Now, he sent them forth two, not just one, but 2. There's some power in 2. There's power all through there. You'll see this too. There's some power in 2 where you stand together in faith and in agreement. There's power in 2. And he sent them forth by 2s and commanded them that they should take nothing for their journey, save a staff only, no scrip, no bread, no money in their purse. Now he's sending them out, and they don't have any credit cards or debit cards or money, no checks. Why is he doing that? Because he wants them to understand that he is their supplier. They can go with nothing, and he will supply their need. He didn't want them to go, and he did. And folks, the people that gets this idea that Jesus was some kind of a pauper out there in the streets don't understand the principles of God. Jesus was not a pauper. He took care of these 12 men for 3.5 years full time. And some of them had families. I know Peter had family. He talks about his mother-in-law. He took care of them full time because there is no shortage in the power of God, and God had anointed him, to do this. And when God sends you forth, folks, you can do whatever God said you could do. If God said you can do it, you can do it. And be shod with sandals and not put on 2 coats. And he said unto them, in what place whatsoever you enter into the house, there abide till you depart from that place. And whosoever shall receive you shall not receive you nor hear you. When you depart thence, shake off the dust under your feet for a testimony against them. Verily I say unto you, it should be more tolerable for Sodom and Gomorrah and the day of judgment than for that city. And he said, if they won't have you, just leave. Just leave. The Bible, if you'll read it there over and over and over, you'll see where it says that they're judged according to their works. Now, see, the penalty for sin is death. But that's the judgment, again, according to your works. And see, We stand before the judgment seat of Christ to be judged again according to what you did with what Jesus gave you, not to see if you're saved or not, but to see where you're at in the government. And it doesn't say, you don't, Jesus knows who you are and what you have, and what you're doing with what you have. But see, we have got this idea all these years, and we've talked about this, it's been a while here. See, the teaching of modern religion says that hell is just the exact same for everybody. And we call God a just God. But if a man, a human judge, you got one old boy that works hard, that takes care of his family, I mean, he's just a big liar. And you got another guy that's a serial rapist, that kills children, that does all these things, and God says, you both got the same punishment. If a human judge did that, he'd be run out of town on a rail. But God is a just God, and we say that's what he does. No, that's not what he does. What he does is, sin is death. I mean, sin is a separation from God. But you are judged according to your work. You're punished according to your works. You just are. And see, there's folks that those people who believe that there's people in hell right now believes that everything's the same. But they still say God's a just God. Now, everything's not the same, folks. Jesus said, these words I speak unto you shall judge you in the last days. So you're judged according to what he has said and according to your works. I don't know how many times in the New Testament you'll find that you're judged according to your works. Now, you're not saved because you work. You're saved by grace. And don't let anybody tell you that the judgment seat of Christ is to see whether or not you're saved. Calvary saw whether or not you were saved. If you've been by Calvary, you're saved. But you are judged at the judgment seat of Christ to see where you're going to be at in the government of Christ. And it's the same way. See, there's no... I'm going to just say this, and we're not going to get far off in this, but there's nobody in hell tonight, folks. There's nobody there. People will teach you that, will tell you, that the rich man, which is a parable that's been burning in hell all these years. No, he hadn't. It was a parable. They stand before the great white throne judgment to be judged according to their works. And then it's the lake of fire. They're not in hell. And why is that? See, if everybody's got the same thing, why is the judgment? And you see over in Revelation, see, people look at this thing and they go by what they've always heard instead of by what the Bible says. And you see things like, and death and hell delivered up the dead which was in them, and they were judged according to their works. And they take that word there, death and hell, as those coming out of hell to be judged. Now, that's coming out of the grave. Now, folks, what does it make God look like if you've been in hell for the last 10,000 years and he's going to bring you up out of hell and say, I got bad news for you, you're going to hell. The what we call the lake of fire, that's where they're cast. How long you stay there is not up to me, it's up to a righteous judge. It's called the second death. D-E-A-T-H. Death. It's called the... Yeah, you're never coming out. You're never coming out. There's no reprieve. But it's the second death. When he told Adam, if you eat of that tree of the knowledge of good and evil, you shall surely die. The penalty of sin was set. Not the judgment. The penalty of sin was set. Now, it's way on over in the Bible before he even mentions hell, and then it's the grave. There is a lake of fire for those who totally reject God at the end. How long you stay there is up to a righteous judge. And it's like I said, how can we call a righteous judge righteous if he judges everybody the same regardless of what they did? They burn up. Everlasting punishment. But you're not. Let me say this. Let me say this. You see, we got all of this confusion because we thought that man was eternal. Man was made eternal. Only sin could kill him, but sin killed him. Jesus said that I have come to give them life. He has given them back what sin had stole from them. Life. Unless we have Jesus, we're just existing, folks. Nowhere in the Bible will you ever see where it talks about man as an eternal soul. Now, let me tell you that too. See, because people will go back and they will get that parable of Jesus where he's talking about Hinnom. Hinnom was a lake of fire. It was a trash pile outside of Jerusalem, and they threw in. Jesus would have went there unless somebody begged his body, unless Joseph of Arimathea had begged his body. But see, when he talked about hell or the lake of fire, he pointed to Hinnom, and what he said was Hinnom. And he said, where the worm never dies and the flame is not quenched. Because in Hinnom, outside those flames, there were always maggots and dead bodies that wouldn't cast in there. And he was comparing hell to Hinnom. He was saying it's burning continually with worms and dead bodies. And Isaiah even talked about the ashes of the wicked being under your feet, didn't he? Burn up. Burn up. See, man is not eternal until Christ gives him back life. The reason he cast man out of the Garden of Eden is so that he wouldn't take of the tree of life, and so he couldn't pay the penalty. He would have been eternally lost. He would have burned eternally, just like Satan. There is an eternal flame. Man is not eternal, but sin is death. What you knew, what opportunity. See, he's a righteous judge, and I can't sit here and just tell you how he's going to judge. I'm going to tell you it's going to be righteous. Yeah. Ain't but two places you're going to go. No, that's again, I can't tell you the punishment, but I can tell you he's a righteous judge, and he will judge righteously. I mean, that's him. But the thing about that is, don't go there. Period. Don't go there, because Christ gave his best to keep you out of there. And I know that, this sounds strange. That's what the Bible teaches. Go in there and dig up and look. There's nobody in hell, and it was prepared for the devil and his angels. When man was created, he was created to live forever. He was. Only sin could kill him. Now, I want you to notice when God told Adam, if you eat of that tree of the knowledge of good and evil, thou shalt surely die. He didn't say that you shall surely die and go to hell. Did he? That'd be a pretty big oversight, wouldn't you think? He said you shall die. That is the penalty. And the Bible all through there talks about the wages of sin is hell. Now the wages of sin is death. The lake of fire is the punishment for what you've done. Knowingly, willingly. See, and only God can be a righteous judge, because only God can see your heart, your spirit, and know what you know and what you had the ability to do. Only God. That's right. He could have dropped dead of a heart attack. But see, so terrible was the punishment for sin on him that Isaiah said he didn't even look like a man. And the penalty for all that, see, on him on that cross came all the penalty for sin, the blindness, the diseases. Isaiah plainly said he didn't look like.
He was marred more than
his visage, the way he looked, was marred more than any man. In other words, he didn't look like a man. And that was the punishment for sin. The penalty was death. He died. And it's just like I said, unless there was some punishment, like she was talking about, unless there was some punishment, he could have just fell dead of a heart attack and got it. He could have sat at the table, covenanted with them for their sin, and died of a heart attack. God could have just called him home, but he didn't. He laid on him the sin of us all. On him. Folks, he began to die at the table. The minute he coveted for our sin, he began to die. That's the reason he had to get to the cross, because sin had to be back on the cross, on the tree. But Jesus, man was not going to resurrect, because man was paying his own penalty for sin. Dead. That was the penalty. But Jesus took not only the penalty but the judgment, so that all of those looking forward to him could raise up in life again. Let me tell you something, folks. And if you think about it, see, and I say it all the time, and you know, you don't want to just hurt folks' feelings, but people will say things like, when somebody dies, God, I saw it today, God has another angel. No, he don't. No, he don't. If they knew Jesus, they are asleep in him, waiting for the call. The bride of Christ is not going to heaven in pieces. The Bible talks about all those that died in faith of the Old Testament. It says, it's in the 11th chapter of Hebrews, I believe, where it says, God has provided us some much better thing, that they without us should not be made perfect.